show for today. I actually had an interesting conversation. I'm a part of this two-way community group, and we had I was talking about conspiracy stuff and that, just like, my general theories, the bankers, well, it's Medley Butler's old line, banker, all wars are bankers' wars, and they spin up people and do stuff and that. And this guy's like this Ukrainian guy, he's a real globalist shill, but inspiration for why I restarted the channel. So I do owe him that. But yeah, he was very much in like, oh no, you can't be doing all these conspiracies. I don't get conspiracies. I'm like, good God, man, you're you're working for the UN and don't believe in conspiracies. It's like conspiracies happen every day, man. It's a crime for a reason. We have criminal conspiracy counts. It's a thing. So everyone's talking about conspiracy theories and it's all crackpot, and like, no, we've seen more than enough evidence from the Epstein files to know there's stuff going on. The guy literally said, the Rothschilds. I'm like, it's a bank. He mentioned in his email to Peter Thiel, Epstein wrote, as you know, I'm with the Rothschilds. All banking houses have intelligence networks. This is a thing. Makes sense. Rich, I always sum it up as, there's a bunch of rich people, and for whatever motives they might have, and we'll certainly in the review video today, we'll be we'll be covering some of the more esoteric parts of it, the heretical parts. If you watch the show with me and my friend Owen, and just there is some crazy stuff happening in the world today. So we're going to do the standard format, which I found working right now, or I've been doing. I don't know if it's been working, but I do have it like 2 people watching me now. We're going to start with the Grok stuff. We're going to give you the Grok summary of the day that I've been doing. I misspelled Iran, of course. I'll fix that in post. Actually, I think I can fix that right now. Edit. Oh yeah, 2 eyes. Thank you, JP. Thank you, JP. Okay, so we have that going on. I'll do the 30-minute script from what Grok's been giving me. He normally says 45, but I talk fast. Then I'll do a review of one of the Crypto Rich's latest videos with Matt Ehret. And finally, we'll top it off with why is Canada on that ship traveling to the moon and back? And what the deal is and what's been going on with that, because I found a very good video covering that yesterday and wanted to share it with you today. So without further ado, the Grok script. Oops. Let me just scroll back up here. Oh, that was why. Okay, sorry. I've been using Grok to create the thumbnail and do the summary, so Grok's helping out a lot. Certainly worth the $5 a month. Welcome to the Spy Guy channel, where we don't chase headlines. We dissect the operations, the backroom leverage, the intelligence blind spots, the raw power calculations that decide who wins and who bleeds. I'm your host, David March, and today is April 8th, 2026, and the board is still smoking. Operation Epic Fury is in a 2-week pause, but the Strait of Hormuz remains a live wire. Trump's apocalyptic truth post lit the fuse. Yeah, and like I said, he had the deal in play when he made that post. This is what, yeah. Iran pushed back with a 10-point maximalist counter, and the insurance markets just turned the economic screws even tighter. Meanwhile, while the world watches the Middle East, NASA's Artemis 2 crew is flying farther from Earth than... Is this just... No, this is yesterday's script. No wonder why. Damn it. Where is today's script? Yeah, this is yesterday's script. I don't know where Grok put today's script. Let me do that right now. Here we go. So that's the April 9th briefing. So I is saying, here we go. Welcome to the Spy Guy channel, where we cut through the fog of war, the press releases, and the spin to expose the real operations, the back channels, the leverage game, the cold power math that decides winners and losers. I'm your host, David March, and it's April 9th, 2026. Day 2 of the so-called 2-week ceasefire in the Middle East is already tested every red line. Israeli airstrikes and artillery have pounded Lebanon, killing over 250 people in what some are calling the deadliest day in months. Hezbollah is firing back with rockets. Iran claims the Strait of Hormuz is open, but on their terms, while a lone Gabon flag tanker slipped through as the first non-Iranian vessel since the pause. Trump just doubled down. All U.S. troops stay put until there's a real agreement. And while the world fixates on the powder keg, NASA's Artemis 2 crew is quietly heading home after flying further from Earth than any human since Apollo 13. 3 critical events from today. We'll dissect the ceasefire cracks that could blow everything open, Trump's troop ultimatum, and the NATO headache it exposes. God, itchy nose suddenly out of nowhere. And the space domain where America is still playing long game while everyone else watches the fireworks. No ideology, just the field intel. Let's get into the ops room. Topic 1. The fragile ceasefire cracks, Israel's Lebanon strikes, Hezbollah retaliation, and the Hormuz standoff. First up, the 2-week U.S. Iran ceasefire announced late April 7th is already hanging by a thread less than 48 hours in. Yeah, I have more faith in this kind of stuff. This is just all smoothing out the edges. Israeli forces launched what reports describe as 10 minutes of intense activity involving around 100 airstrikes plus artillery on Hezbollah targets across Lebanon. Lebanese health authorities now put the death toll from the past day or so over 300 killed to more than 1,150 injured. Hezbollah responded with rockets hitting the Israeli kibbutz of Manara and claims of point-blank clashes in towns like Bint Jebel. Yes. Israeli forces say they took out Hezbollah-linked commanders, including relatives of senior leadership. Iran insists the ceasefire was approved at the highest levels, even by the new supreme leader, but accuses Israel and, by extension, the U.S. of violations that free them from full compliance. Tehran claims the Strait of Hormuz is now open to all vessels that coordinate with them, yet Gulf officials and shipping truckers say traffic remains heavily restricted, with that one Gabon tanker moving through for first non-Iranian since the pause. But Abu Dhabi's oil chief says Iran is still controlling limited passage, alternative routes, and sea mine concerns are being floated by the IRGC Navy. What's left of it? Hard to be a Navy when you don't have any boats or ships. I guess they still have some boats. This is what Israel always does. They don't seek permission. They do something stupid, and then the president or Trump has to ring them in, say, stop doing that. And they just and they'll stop, but they'll get in their last lick in. Well, the realist breakdown, this isn't accidental. Israel never fully bought into the Iran-focused ceasefire. Yeah, a lot of people in Israel are freaking out. And you can see it on people's X feeds. Israel never bought into the Iran-focused ceasefire applying to its Lebanon theater. Hezbollah is Iran's forward proxy. Hitting them keeps pressure on Tehran without direct U.S. escalation, but every strike risks dragging the U.S. back in. Israel's partial Hormuz reopening is classic asymmetric play of enough movement to claim compliance and ease oil prices, but enough control to maintain leverage for sanctions relief and reconstruction cash in the 10-point proposal. Yeah, and definitely I was listening to Mark Halpern last night on Megyn Kelly, and he made the point that a lot of people are thinking that there will be a conglomerate of that there's something to Iran uh, green to the thing for Iran to have control of the straits by charging a fee, and that will give them buy-in to basically start be an irrational actor because they would be making money, reconstruction money, and being able to start paying off their troops again by control by that rental fee. And his speculation, there will be a conglomerate of some sort, probably back. He didn't say through the border peace, but that would make sense. Using a piece of border peace to do some sort of Suez Canal style operation, and everyone will get all the Gulf states that are inside there will get access to it, and basically there's a deal to be made here, and I feel that's definitely the way to go. What they're not telling you, back-channel talks via Pakistan with J.D. Vance reportedly involved are happening, but the gaps are huge. Iran wants permanent sanctions relief and regional de-escalation. Trump wants verifiable denuclearization and unrestricted strait access, possibly even a U.S. Iran joint venture for security, which I just talked about. A single tanker crossing looks like progress on paper, but lines are told demands persist. Global oil markets will keep jittering and domestic pressure will mount. As always, the real danger, miscalculation. One more big Hezbollah barrage or Israeli grounding carriage, and the 2-week clock resets to 0 or worse. Personally, I think I was listening to, well, we'll get into the trapping of Israel in the next one. Listener question is, the question for listeners, is this ceasefire theater to buy time for repositioning or a genuine off-ramp that's already collapsing under regional realities? Topic 2. Trump's troop ultimatum and the NATO fracture. Stay until real agreement. Zoom out to the White House signal today. President Trump made clear that all U.S. military assets and troops in the Middle East will remain in place until there is a real agreement with Iran. No quick withdrawal, no victory lap, maximum leverage maintained. But this also means you have time to rest and reorganize the troops. This comes in as Vice President Vance prepares travel to the region for talks and amid growing public friction with NATO. Reports indicate Trump is exploring ways to punish or pressure allies who set out support during an Iran operation. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte reportedly met with Trump to smooth things over, but the underlying point resentment is real. Europe free riding on U.S. security gains while offering little in return during a crisis that spiked energy prices for everyone. All part of my maximalist theory on Europe. Now we're seeing that play out. Definitely, it looks like Vance won't be going to Pakistan for security concerns. I wouldn't be surprised if they just move the summits to somewhere else. Dubai was always favorable because of though it's under threat from Iran's missiles, but there's bound to be some place there. Maybe they'll put it in Djibouti or something like that, so where the Chinese have a base, and the Iranians wouldn't want to piss them off. Spy guy angle. This is textbook interest-based power politics. Trump is treating the deployment as a bargaining chip. Keep forces forward deployed to deter Iranian cheering on the ceasefire and the Hormuz reopening while forcing European capitalists to confront their own vulnerability. Realism says alliance are transactions, not charities. And that's something I was getting into with Andre a little this morning. Oh, yeah. And then my other discussion with this sounds like my dinner with Andre. This is, though he spells it in Ukrainian style. I was listening to him go on about his vision, and I was just like, I would like to see you go up to an Azov battalion guy or a right sector guy and make that pitch for Ukraine, because I'm pretty sure they'll kill you. He's like, we're just expanding and expanding and expanding. The coalition gets bigger, and when that happens, everyone's life gets better in the European Union. I'm like, what are you? Everyone and like normal people, most of the guys uh, in there are much more regular Americans. So we got very hawkish guys to former missile operators and stuff like that. And this guy going off like that, and we're like looking at him as if he grew. They were looking at him as if he grew a second head. Like, what are you talking about? Europe's a crappy little place. Okay. What they're not telling you. NATO's value was always burden sharing for collective defense. When it becomes one-way U.S. subsidization of European energy security, the math stops working pretty much. England, you might want to open up those oil gas fields after all. What they're not telling you, the longer U.S. troops stay back, the higher the risk of entanglement in Lebanon, spillover, or renewed Iranian proxy attacks. But pulling out too soon hands Tehran and the Russian Chinese backers. I'm not too sure about the Russian angle. I think the Russians are still pissed off about Chechnya, as I've said in other places. This is much more Chinese making the decision play here. I think the Russians are content to let the Iranians rot. A narrative went and could spike oil again. Watch for quiet Gulf state reactions. They want the Strait open and Iranian power checked, but not at the cost of becoming permanent U.S. forward bases. And you know what? America doesn't want U.S. forward bases either. They want to keep. This is all about cleaning up the mess and getting out. The hidden play. This ultimatum also signals to Beijing, while we're tied down in enforcing energy lanes, China watches Taiwan and the South China Sea. Rapid resolution that secures U.S. interests without endless commitment is the smart exit. Anything else risks strategic distraction at exactly the wrong moment in great power competition. Finally, topic 3, the nice source subject we've been covering the last few days. The Artemis 2 lunar flyby, U.S. space superiority in the background noise of Earth crisis. While the Middle East dominates every feed, NASA Artemis 2 mission is in its final day in space. The 4-person crew, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, woke up today to lonesome drifter stowed gear, ran off nominal scenario drills, and held another news conference from the Orion. They've already broken the Apollo 13 distance record, flown around the far side of the moon, and are on track for Pacific splashdown tomorrow evening, April 10th. Daily briefings from Johnson Space Center confirm systems are nominal, with stunning imagery still coming down. My long game view. This isn't just a test flight, it's strategic signaling in the ultimate high ground. While adversaries focus on proxies, choke points, and terrestrial wars, the U.S. demonstrates reliable deep space crewed capability, radiation-hardened systems, and heavy lift readiness for the Artemis 3 landing and eventual lunar gateway. China is racing towards its own crewed lunar timeline. Every successful U.S. milestone reminds them America still sets the pace in cislunar space. What they're not telling you, dual-use tech from Artemis feeds directly to Space Force priorities, comms, navigation's rapid response in orbit. With proposed budget increases and heavy commercial involvement, SpaceX et al., this keeps U.S. superiority while rivals pour resources into hypersonics and ground conflicts. The timing is perfect. Let the world obsess over all oil and airstrikes while quietly advancing the domain that could decide conflicts decades from now, the entire future of the race. Realism, says space, isn't a distraction. It's the insurance policy against overextension on Earth. And that's the April 9th, 2026 Grok briefing on the Spy Guy channel. Ceasefire cracks in Lebanon, threatening the Iran pause. Trump's troops stay until deal ultimatum, exposing NATO tensions. And Artemis 2, quietly proving U.S. space edge amid the chaos. These events show the same pattern. Leverage is temporary. Miscalculation is permanent. And the real game is balancing short-term fires with long-term positioning. Drop your takes below. And is the ceasefire salvageable? Well, or are we watching it unravel in real time? How long before NATO friction forces a reckoning? And as Artemis 2, the reminder we need that great power competition is multidimensional. Subscribe, hit notifications for instant drops when the next escalation hits, and stay sharp. The shadows never sleep. Yeah, so we'll be going on to the second part of the show where we review a Rich Does Politics episode. And yeah. Also, by the way, I just kind of reminding people, I do have a locals channel I've been meaning to update for a little bit. I really need to do that, but I have a puzzle on my desk and it's sucking up all my time. Okay, sharing screen. There we go. There's Rich.
There's been a ceasefire announced in Iran and the US. But has this whole project, this whole war, this whole undertaking by Trump, is it about building a greater Israel or destroying Israel? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. So, Matt, what's Trump doing? Destroying Israel or building a greater Israel?
Rich, that's a good lead. That's a good hook, and it's a good question.
It is a great question.
I'm not usually, when it comes to current events and play-by-play actions, especially in the fog of war, I'm reticent to necessarily give absolute assessments of things because I like to let things sit a little bit, let the dust settle a little bit before rushing over too quickly to irresponsible commentary. And there's a lot of that when people, because in the alternative media space, which we should just call the media space, frankly, everybody kind of wants to get in on the scoop and impose their opinions. And more often than not, whether it's super cynical, whether it's super white-pilled, oftentimes it's messy, it's overly quick. So I'm not going to necessarily say absolutely what Trump is or isn't doing. What I can say is that we had a lot of concern. We're speaking today on, what is it, the 8th of April? So this is, just not even 24 hours ago. There was a lot of people had held their breath. There wasn't a certainty whether or not Trump's very extreme rhetoric of a civilization may end tonight, whether that was going to be followed through on or not. Knowing his general...
And a reminder, my contention, he had the deal already in place, and it was just a matter of running it out the news cycle and seeing everyone freak out. Maybe they were doing the final details of the deal or the 2-week ceasefire, but I do think it was in the bag, as they say.
General strategy, which has been consistent since 2016. I didn't presume that he was going to necessarily end a civilization. Usually he'll say something radically bad and disgusting and then do something pretty sane. That's often been a theme.
Yeah.
Sometimes he'll say something pretty nice and pretty great, but then do something kind of destructive. We're in a golden age, for example. Americans should be appreciative that they're living in the golden age. It's here. And if you're facing poverty, if you can't afford gas, if you can't afford food, if you don't like inflation, you're not dealing, you don't like the fact that the jobs are not there, doesn't matter. That's in your head. It's actually a golden age. So you got those things too, right? Both kind of a...
But Matt, it is a golden age on two counts.
Yes.
Relative to America under Biden, and in the alternative universe where Kamala Harris is the president, we do have a golden age, I would say.
Oh, yeah, sure. Everything is a matter of context and contrast, I suppose.
Anyway,
compared to that chainsaw cutting my arm off, this blade stabbing me is not that bad. It's pretty good, I guess. So all that to say, there is some contrarian methodology. It's consistent though, of saying one thing, doing the other. Which again, because of its consistency, you can't say it's a sign of lack of intelligence, as many people are wont to call Trump, a stupid idiot who only decides what he's going to do moment to moment. I don't think that that's the case at all. I think there is a broader strategy.
Yeah, same here. Maybe the first administration kind of gave us this idea that he was flying more by the seat of his pants in that first amendment, and I think there is something to that. But I think there is a project that is being unrolled here with a lot of smart people who had 4 years to basically craft a 4-year plan. So we're seeing a lot of that plan rolling out, and because we're not in the decision-making rooms, people are freaking out, and that's one of the things I see out there.
To what degree is it coordinated, as some would like to believe, with Russia, with China, with Iran even? That's up for grabs. What I will say, though, is that despite the fact that a ceasefire was called, instead of bombs dropping, a ceasefire was called, which made everybody, I think, quite relieved that that World War III was not necessarily going to be triggered in that form the way it could have been. There's still inconsistencies that, again, have to be addressed. Number one, as you asked, does this play into, or does this not play into the greater Israel agenda, right? So we know that Israel didn't take them 2 seconds to start, or I won't say Israel, but the Zionists around Netanyahu didn't take them long to just completely go ballistic and usher in or announce what's known as Operation Eternal Darkness this morning. That's the actual name that they gave their attack on Lebanon, which has now killed, my last time I checked, over 250 people killed in mass carpet bombings across a variety of Lebanese cities from Beirut and onward. Many of them are Christian.
And that's where Tucker get a little upset, where the Israelis just indiscriminately kill a bunch of Christians and then expect us to be totally cool with that. And he gets into all the heresy involving Christian Zionism later in this show. So thanks for stopping by, Carrie.
Doesn't matter. Mass death.
They're all human.
They're all human, right? Mass death across the board, mostly innocent civilians. Iran has responded by saying, well, this actually breaks one of the first elements of the ceasefire, the 10-point demands that were supposed to be the starting point for negotiations for a ceasefire, which was Lebanon must be included in the ceasefire. And that was what the Pakistani prime minister announced. That's what Araghchi also just made a point, the foreign minister of Iran. And the head of the IRGC also made the same point. Like, this completely shows a major betrayal. And the Straits of Hormuz are once again closed. The question now is the meeting that was supposed to happen in Islamabad even going to happen? Because currently many leading elites within Iran are saying if Lebanon is not included, which is part of the Greater Israel program, the Zionists that believe in Greater Israel also believe that Lebanon must be taken over and incorporated, as must all of Palestine, all of Gaza, all of West Bank, all of Jordan, much of Iraq, much of Syria, a third of Saudi Arabia, some of Egypt, all should be part of that new package, as we talked about, you and I, a couple of weeks ago in the Greater Israel special that we did. So if that's not included, then the meeting's not going to happen. The negotiations between Witkoff and the Iranians will not happen in Pakistan as is hoped. So that's a big question. Is that even going to happen? Now,
my guess is it's going to happen. It might not happen in Islamabad, but I think it's still going to happen. I guess the reason why they wanted to happen in Islamabad is because you can take a land transit from Iran to Pakistan. So there's security concerns over that one. They've said about bans, but I think it's still going to happen. You can always Zoom call in.
There does seem to be factions breaking up within the U.S., especially conservative establishment, but that includes also liberals. The conservatives have historically been pro-Zionist up until about 2 years ago, really up until the evidence of genocide in Gaza became something that couldn't be ignored, and the evidence through the Epstein files disclosures, there's been more and more revelations that have not been something that conservatives could ignore about the influence of Israeli intelligence operations over the U.S. Political class, but also just the complete genocide that we are acquiescing and supporting. So that has resulted now in, for the first time ever, more Americans having sympathy, including conservatives, with the Palestinians uh, over Israel, which is pretty big, and that's accelerating.
Yeah.
That survey, that consensus that Israel is definitely out of control, is operating on the wrong side of history. And the question for a lot of those people is, to what degree is Trump also participating openly in a pro-Zionist program, or is he possibly setting the stage, as my colleagues at Badlands Media, or some of my colleagues at Badlands Media, my co-host of a show I host, is he of the view that actually Trump is secretively working to set Israel up in order to leave Israel hanging after launching the war? And my co-host, Gordon, who co-hosts a show with me called Breaking History, made a point very early in this conflict, that he believed that Trump, who said maybe we started the war. Was it Israel or was it us? Maybe we got Israel to do it. He said, well, maybe Trump set a trap. Maybe he was telling the truth, that he actually didn't just go in because he got foreknowledge that Israel was going to do it, and thus had to do it, as he says, in order to protect U.S. assets in the Middle East, which was the public messaging. But maybe Trump actually always wanted it and did it in such a way that once the small yappy dog would start getting the confidence that the big dog with the big military would back them up no matter what, as has been the historic tendency up until this moment, that the big dog would leave the little dog to suffer the consequences of being a yappy, arrogant dog, which partially, when you look at the anger of a lot of the radical Zionists, including Lara Loomer, but many leading figures around Netanyahu in Israel, they're certainly not happy that a ceasefire was even entertained and that they were not invited to even have that discussion.
Right. There's a tell right there. They weren't. They didn't have the kids didn't have a seat at the big boys' table. They were cut out. So all these people keep saying, "Well, they're secretly controlled by Israel." I'm like, look at what's happening here. He didn't have his. What if Israel's secretly in control? Why didn't they discuss the ceasefire with them? They completely cut them out.
At all. So they're pissed. Now, again, was that part of the idea? It was clearly very predictable that they would be pissed. It's also known that they have a Samson doctrine and that they have a radically religious trans geopolitical belief. It goes beyond geopolitical self-interest. It's a religious belief in an expansionist policy to culminate and fulfill God's mandate to the Jews thousands of years ago. Was this predictable that they would then go and do what they're doing now to sabotage this ceasefire?
Mhm.
Was it also the case that they are going to be much more vulnerable to counterattack, or maybe even be pressed into a corner, which would invoke the Samson doctrine, which we all know they have now had as an active doctrine for decades, since the 1970s, which calls for launching all of the nuclear missiles in Israel's warhead, in their arsenal, if they should feel existentially threatened,
All
which would
of them.
involve killing everybody around them, including themselves, in the same kind of logic that Samson did in the story in the Old Testament, where he literally, gained the fiery strength of God at the last moment, long after his hair had been cut and he was humiliated and shackled, in a temple, surrounded by Philistines, and used his last bit of God-given strength to kill everybody, to break the columns, and suicide himself while he was at it. So, is this something that, whether quickly or whether in a series of additional steps, is that what we're on as a pathway or not? I'm uncertain. I'm just simply uncertain about these things, but I think these are all variables. As I said, Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz once again, not even 24 hours after the ceasefire was hoped for. We have Caroline Leavitt, who's also said that Trump has outrightly rejected Iran's 10-point peace plan for discussion, that it was garbage. There's some elements within it that were apparently good, and a lot of elements which were not. So
Didn't he
where
say
is
it
that
was
going to
wo-
take us?
Didn't he say it was workable?
He said it was workable, and then all of a sudden, I'm seeing now his spokespeople saying that he doesn't think it's workable. So,
Okay,
it,
but that
why the lack of consistency in messaging, right?
because
Is a
that's what
question I
Trump
have.
does, as you
Mm,
said earlier, right? That could be
yeah.
him just throwing people off kilter like he always does, like he did with his fabulously erudite, articulate, and sophisticated Easter Sunday post. Now,
Mm,
I know you do videos with Joaquin Flores on your channel, right? And I do videos with Joaquin Flores. And I'm going to be recording another one with him on the 9th of April. So watch out for that. And I recorded one with him a couple of weeks ago where he talks about how Trump talks in code. Now, that's Joaquin's argument. I'm not disputing it, nor am I saying, okay, that's it. I just want to see how these things play out,
Mhm.
right? Um, See, one of the things I've been wondering about, Matt, and I don't know if I've said this to you, but I have said this on some of my other videos. So, Matt, you are now president of the United States,
yes.
and
Yeah.
you have a commitment to get the US out from under the heel of the City of London and out of the control of the Zionists. But you got to do that in such a way that you don't end up like JFK.
Yeah.
How do you play that game?
So the first thing you want to do is ensure that that ISIS gets control of Syria. You want to make sure that you do everything possible to cripple any chance of the Belt and Road Initiative or the Russian transport corridors in Eurasia. You want to make sure that that is completely crippled. You want to make sure that you start attacking infrastructure that China built in Iran. That's part of the Belt and Road. You want to make sure that that's done. You want to
Why?
definitely
What has that got to do with getting out from under the heel of the Zionists?
being sarcastic. No, you
Oh,
definitely want to empower. You want to ensure that Wall Street bankers
Mhm.
get as much influence, and you don't want to do Glass-Steagall. No matter what, you definitely, if you want to get rid of the City of London controls over U.S. finance and get sovereign control, you don't want to use the power of the Constitution to restore Glass-Steagall, and you don't want to break up the banks. You don't want to do that. It happened before in the 30s, and we don't want to do that
I
again.
think you're being a bit
Um,
naughty with me again.
Yeah.
I'm not. No, no. This is the things I don't want to do. Okay,
Mhm.
and
Oh,
and definitely you
Rich did ask him the question: how do I do this without getting advice? You won't get killed.
don't want to release the Epstein files. You definitely don't want all of the pedophilia, all of that stuff that's been revealed in those. You don't want that definitely to be made public. You don't want to put anybody in jail. That's super important too. Definitely important. Um, yeah, there's a number of other things. You probably would help to weaken the U.S. dollar immensely. That's going to be probably the really, really good, and maybe jack up the price of fertilizer and food costs. That's also going to be really useful to weaken the City of London
All right,
over the
stop,
U.S. I
stop
think.
it.
Keep going. No, no, no. Give me a whole show of this.
Okay, so a few of the things, right? And then I'll go back
Yeah.
to Israel. So Trump appointed Jay Powell, who put in place SOFR as a replacement for LIBOR, so that the City of London no longer controls the pricing of the dollar. That's now set domestically
Mhm.
versus through the.
And Canada is also on SOFR. I confirmed that very early on with Tom when I learned it. So like, yeah, we're going to convert over a year later. So I think we were. I can't remember when that happened, but we converted to SOFR as well. So people who think Mark Carney is really running the show here, there's other people playing the game. And I just reached out to Promethean Action actually and said, hey, you really, I heard you were mentioning my country today. You guys don't understand how this place works. And I'm happy to tell you because you guys are not understanding. Now, I'm not heavily connected to Alberta's independence movement. I'm stuck in Ontario, but there is a lot going on in in Canada that is getting ignored because Americans have no idea how this country works, and I would say most Canadians don't realize how the country works. And when I explain it to them, they're like, "Oh
City
yeah,
of
that makes
London,
sense."
which also.
Yeah, they don't know how the country works. That it's all about the provinces. They think Ottawa is like Washington D.C. and it's not. Carney might get his majority government, maybe finally bribe the last MP to cross the floor yesterday. I can't remember what's going on there because I don't pay attention to Ottawa politics because it's not that important. Toronto, in Queen's Park, that's where the action is in Ontario. So that's where the big deals are being done. It's all being done at the provincial level, not at the federal level. So there's not much. What the federal government does is they can screw up internal stuff. Try to regulate some things, but as I've said numerous times, if Doug Ford wants to build a pipeline to James Bay and put a port there, there's nothing Carney can do to stop him.
The controls the Federal Reserve. And then there's stuff that Trump is putting in place in terms of I don't quite understand it. This is Tom Luongo's speciality.
Oh, shit.
But what it would do is bypass the Fed, the control of the Fed, because you got to do it in a way, because JFK.
We're having technical difficulties yet again. I'm not on mute. This is in. Microphone's in. I don't know what's going on while you're not having audio. I'm going to go here, here. Okay. Hello? Am I talking? Oh, I hear me. I hear me on mine. I just went to my channel there, so it sounds like it might be you. Yep. Okay. So it was just you had to come and. Okay, fair enough. Thanks for. Yeah, after the last week, that was a bit scary, but yeah. So thanks, JP. Good. Okay, so I'm just going to continue watching, and we'll continue on with that. But I was just saying, I think those folks over there have a lot of misconceptions about how Canada works, and I just feel like, hey, maybe we can get one of them to come on or something like that and kind of explain it to them.
Kay wanted to introduce a silverback dollar and the Federal Reserve.
I don't know to what degree he wanted to have a full-blown silverback dollar.
But there was something he was going to do.
There's something about getting the Treasury to have more influence over the Fed. Yeah, that involved.
Yeah, which is just dangerous. You don't want to go up against the banksters too obviously, right? Then how about this as a fractal? Well, actually not as a fractal. So the US starts a war with Iran. And then Iran, one of the things that Iran does is it attacks Israel and actually challenges the notion of Israel as a safe refuge nation for Jewish people. Because the missiles are getting through, people are leaving Israel because it's not safe, just like they've exposed Dubai as
they're
not
going
safe.
to Argentina and a variety of other places, that are being set up as new bastions. Yep, that's true.
But they're leaving Israel, right? And then and then Israel's economy is suffering.
Yep.
Then
we certainly have no idea. Yeah, Israel's economy is suffering, always under these kind of conditions. I have a couple of Jewish friends, my two-way age group, and they were telling me how it all operates over there. This was definitely about 2 weeks ago, but yeah, they were allowing people to go to work, but almost all the cafes are closed, or people were allowed to go to work, but they were just running away from stuff. And we have because of Israel's media blackout, we have no idea how much damage they will have taken. But if a ceasefire turns into a treaty, Bibi's going to have to tell everyone's going to know how bad it is in Israel and around the world. We know how bad it is in all the other Gulf countries.
And it's actually they're up against an opponent that isn't defenseless civilians in Palestine or southern Lebanon, right? An opponent who hits back hard.
Yeah. So in two things there. Number one, the US dollar is a time bomb. It's been transformed into a time bomb that will collapse. The non-collapse of the US dollar it's an impossibility and has been for many years. It's the question of on whose terms will it collapse and what will be the terms of the new system, which is the nature of the contention and the fight right now between especially China and Russia and other nations in the East who have a different idea of what an operating system should be and who should that system serve versus in the West, which has a different concept. Now, hyperinflation is an inevitability. The amount of there are when you take the derivatives contracts into consideration that have been permitted to grow exponential or hyperbolically, especially since the takedown of regulation systematically since the 80s and especially
Yeah, so that's definitely getting into some more Promethean action thing. I was on my 2A group today, and Kelly, friend of the show, we've done a couple of shows with her, and she was trying to explain to people all this stuff that we kind of cover here. And I'm like, you can't just dump people into this willy-nilly. They don't have the depth of it's taken me years to get to this depth of knowledge on this subject. You just can't throw people into this stuff. They're not going to understand. They don't understand. They're too far into like their normal lives. You just can't go up to normies and start explaining this thing to them, or they think you're crazy.
with Glass-Steagall's takedown in the Britain, you had the Big Bang removal of separation of trusts and finance and commercial and investment banking back in the 80s, but that was used as a precedent by Greenspan and JP Morgan to do the same for Glass-Steagall. That created these massive mergers and the use of safe capital of the clean part of the economy that's tied to the real economy in speculation, and then derivatives on top of speculation resulted in trillions, quadrillions of dollars of fictitious capital that is hyperinflationary. We've been printing it out. Soon they're going to bail it in by stealing people's capital from the banks and turning it into bank stops to prop up systematically too big to fail banks. That's going to be another trigger where people are going to even more quickly desperately want to remove their cash, which is going to again be all part of the planned blowout of Weimar 1923, but with more people, bigger in scope. So you can't really avoid that. Trump did identify correctly in 2017, right before the QAnon operation was made public, that Glass-Steagall was a good idea that he said he wanted to do in 2017. He never said it anymore, though. Somebody told him, don't bring it up again. And for whatever reason, he didn't bring it up again, despite the massive amount of support it had in the population and even amongst bipartisan members of Congress and Senate. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Okay.
That's an interesting point. Why doesn't he want to do that? Who told him to stop talking about that? Because yeah, it is very popular and would get probably passed. It would be like, maybe not now, but definitely then he would have had the ability to do that.
I would say number one, as I mean, that's Tom Luongo's assessment. I know the SOFR versus LIBOR battle and the bypassing of the these for me are secondary or tertiary mechanics that negate the fact that the system itself is designed to blow, and that's already been known. So who's going to be managing deck chairs on the Titanic for me is not a really big concern. We should be like figuring out how to get off the Titanic and onto a boat that floats. Number two, on the issue of Israel, I think that here, let me just quickly show an image that I think is going to make this visceral. In my research, and I've written 3 books on this. One of them is called The Revenge of the Mystery Cults, Volume 1, Mystery Babylon and the Age of Aquarius. Greater Israel looks like this, all right? This is a map, which you're looking at, featuring the ambition for Greater Israel of the valley to the Euphrates, the Nile to the Euphrates.
Can you expand the image?
I can, yeah.
So we see the image and not the toolbars and the sidebar.
Just the image.
Yeah, that's it.
So I'm not going to go through a presentation. It's just this slide was something that was up on my desktop. It looks strikingly, it's not exactly, but it's strikingly similar to the contours of the Neo-Babylonian Empire which existed in the form on the right there, which you could see, and that was the nature, that was the size of the Babylonian Empire during the 48 years
Mhm.
where the Jews were held in captivity. During which time, as well, many Jewish scriptures were also mucked around with by high priests of the cult of Marduk, which was the dominant solar cult that ran Babylon, which later on transposed itself into Persia and continued to manage Persia after Cyrus the Great came into Babylon and paid homage to the cult of Marduk. Again, that Marduk, by the way, just so those who may not be aware, is a Babylonian solar deity that was used as an archetype, a prototype for the later god of Apollo, another solar deity, the god Helios, the god Mithra, as well as the god Lucifer in the Christian language when that eventually emerged. They're all kind of different variations of the exact same deity, um, and the same high priesthood architecture which manages these cults.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me because Lucifer or Satan uh, just doesn't strike me as an Apollo type figure. So I just always kind of I get the Morning Star aspect, the woke stuff, but I just as he's been portrayed in Christianity, he doesn't come off as Apollo, right?
So I think in my analysis, when I look at those originators of the state of Israel, of Zionism as an ideology, both within its Christian costume as well as within its Jewish costume, um, I'm seeing people who are obsessively committed to invoking the Antichrist in order to play out the book of Revelation, which is a very allegorical book at the end of the Bible, um, written supposedly by John of Patmos, or John, but even that's up for dispute. But it's a highly allegorical book describing an eschatological end time situation, which requires a certain city named Jerusalem to be around 7 hills, and it requires certain things to be met, out of which a whore of Babylon may emerge, that Babylon may be recreated in order to usher in the Antichrist, and then invoke Jesus to come back for the second time, or if you're a Jew, the first time. Um, Again, you and I went through a lot of these details in our greater.
Yeah. I covered some of this stuff with my friend Owen because I could tell there's something heretical here, but I wasn't too sure what it is. And all these poor Jewish Zionists who think the Christian Zionists want good things for them just do not understand that the danger, what these guys are planning to do to you, is a bad thing. And he's going to tell us the bad thing shortly.
Greater Israel discussion, so I won't go through that again. But all that to say, whether it's Aleister Crowley and his followers who played a big role in shaping the growth of much of Zionism, which did happen, and that's provably the case, or whether it's the followers of John Nelson Darby, who also had an obsession with Greater Israel, getting the Jews of the world to go and live in the desert and to be the place whereby Babylon could be recreated so that the Antichrist could finally make his big comeback and bring in this period of purgative violence, or whether it's Jabotinsky's close collaborator, Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, who we talked about in our last episode, the head Ashkenaz rabbi of Jerusalem for Greater British Mandate Palestine, who, as a Kabbalist, said the truth of Israel is found in Kabbalah, not the Torah, Kabbalah, which is basically Jewish mysticism. And he also said that in order to usher in the New World Order, a great cataclysm must emerge in order for a new great war to solidify the resolve and identities of the new breed of human that he wanted to see emerge, that would go through a period of tribulation. Again, very much in a similar vein as that period of tribulation that the followers of John Nelson Darby also demanded happen to bring in, in their case, they have a little spin where they added the rapture into it too, But and this is something that I definitely see when I listen to and I read the books written by Pete Hegseth, and I listen to the speeches of a lot of the people around Trump. A lot of them have a Kabbalist orientation, and a lot of them see Israel as something that should be destroyed, as a great sacrifice to ultimately be annihilated by design by those who created Israel in the first place, which would in some cases be assisted by Israel's own hand doing it through this Samson doctrine.
Right. Or
Like, wow. I just keep getting blown away by like what the Christian Zionists are planning is bad for Israel. This is why we need to get these people. And thankfully, I think they're going to be much less of a force going into the future after October 7th. But good God, they want they would happily have a Samson-like effect. I do not want that at all.
Is being destroyed slowly through Iran's assault on it and the destruction of the economy and people leaving. And then one of the things I can't get, Matt, is how, because Israel's got a population of 8-9 million. How on earth are they going to occupy and hold the Greater Israel territory? We think
Slaves.
What?
Slaves. I think that they expect to have a lot of minions of the Untermenschen.
Oh God! What's the
savages.
population of Egypt? Egypt's got a really large population.
Like 90 million or something.
Yeah. What? They just go, okay, sure, come on in. We ain't going to object.
I mean, the power of delusion can run strong in certain people. It's a dangerous thing. Yeah.
And then I saw also a small part of Turkey. Oh yeah, Turkey's a pushover. They don't have a military worth anything. Turkey, right?
Oh, and for and then forget about the fact that there is, like it or not, I mean, there's a good Turkey, I think a healthy nationalist Turkey that cares about its people, but then you also have a sort of, a greater Turkey, a greater, restoration of the Ottoman Empire ideology as well, which is also present, which has a much bigger set of borders than the current Turkey that we see on a map. They run into Greater Israel on several points here, and you're like, have they thought this through? Like, that's a recipe for disaster. Yeah.
That's right. And the Greater Turkey, I think, is a whole lot more viable than a Greater Israel because there's way more Muslims there. It harks back to the Ottoman Empire, which wasn't that long ago.
Well, and see, for me, like, this is where I get frustrated because I know that we have seen now ISIS, which is a U.S. construct, a British American construct, which has grown and has now all of a sudden become the sanctioned government of Syria. And I've seen people say, oh, but look, Syria is now signing deals with Turkey for building pipelines into Europe, and which Saudi Arabia has also supported with their energy pact with Syria and Turkey as well for a greater energy region. That might bypass Israel, might leave Israel hanging to dry, maybe. But at the same measure, it's like, okay, I can't deny that economic development and pipelines are a good idea. I'm okay with that. And regional cooperation is a good idea. I'm okay with that too. But it's like, if this is part of some great design, and now, Giuliani, who is the former, head chopper of ISIS, who's now government, is being induced to do this, which is okay, that's a great thing. Why is this somehow better and more viable now that ISIS is controlling Syria than it was when Bashar al-Assad, who had the support of the Russians, of the Chinese, who wanted to join the Belt and Road? Why would it not have been better to just make these offers when he was in there? Why are we only now making these offers for economic development of that region when ISIS is now in control?
It's simple. Right? Giuliani's our head chopper.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
That's what it is, right? Now,
yeah.
What was I going to say? The something about that. I remember having conversations with Alex Craner at the time, how HTS, Giuliani's forces of 10,000 with lightly armored trucks or whatever, and pickup trucks, and the Syrian army they defeated the Syrian army, this battle-hardened army.
Yeah.
And where are they now? And I remember.
Yeah, he's getting there, the battle-hardened army. Well, the problem with that battle-hardened army was that generals are getting paid $40 US a month for salary. And when you show up with we saw the same kind of thing in Afghanistan. When you see this in other places, you just show up with suitcases full of cash and you just bribe the guys to look the other way. And You just go and take the capital. That's kind of how this operation type works. So but he's going to ask, where are all those head choppers now?
But Alex Crane is saying they're gone into the border of Iraq, where they're biding their time, possibly. I don't know. But what happened to them, and what are they doing?
I mean, there's been mass executions as well, right? Not a lot of people didn't get out. And a lot of the former allies of Assad, including people in the establishment, people in the military, suffered mass executions. I mean, Giuliani's teams and death squads went around village to village. It wasn't just the Druze and the Alawites. It was also many loyalists. I mean, the Alawites, that was Assad, but I mean, it was also of every color, including Sunni, people who preferred and recognized the legitimacy of Syria under Assad and were not in accord with the new regime, were executed. So that's one thing. You did have many people. Some did escape. Some went to Iraq. That's true. Mm-hmm. But many were just outright executed. I don't even know if Turkey took many people in. I know some sought sanctuary in Europe and were not receiving it. Europe was under Assad when ISIS was being actually prosecuted with the help of the Russians. Europe was more than happy to welcome in as many anti-ISIS collaborators anti-Assad collaborators of ISIS as they wished, with no strings, and same thing for North America. But all of a sudden, when Giuliani's in there, the pro-ISIS forces who are seeking sanctuary were not getting that. And I read a number of assessments and reports from people on the ground who are talking about those things. So, I don't know those details in greater refinement, but certainly, like you said, he's our terrorist. He's our head chopper, I should say. And Turkey has a lot of potential. It was sort of entertaining the idea of being a part of the Belt and Road Initiative, as was Syria under Assad, as was Iraq, which had attempted to join the Belt and Road Initiative until they were told they're not allowed. Mm-hmm. And of course, the U.S. still controls, like Hussein Askari demonstrated, the analyst from the Schiller Institute, he demonstrated this conclusively, that the Iraqi oil revenues are still completely under the control of the U.S. Federal Reserve in New York. And it has been since 2003. They never let go of their control over Iraqi oil revenue. So they're still holding Iraq hostage, economically speaking.
But the U.S. have left their bases in Iraq. Hmm? I understand the U.S. have left their bases in Iraq.
I have to get more information about that. I'm reticent to speak about that. I just know that they've brought a lot of
I'm my understanding it's more forward pre-positioning stuff, so they might have had most of their guys out except for a small force initially, but in this ramp up they've definitely brought in a lot of guys into Iraq, and the base got struck there. So this is all kind of speculation going on from there on in, but I just wanted to show you that video today, and then I have the next video I'm queuing up, and we'll be covering Canada and the space race, which is kind of interesting how we got involved in this, because we've been trying to why NASA? It was kind of a good question. Well, I didn't know about, but here we go. So last part.
A Canadian is traveling around the moon.
And it wasn't a gift. You earned it.
It's not that the United States has graciously decided to include a Canadian in it. It's that Canada actually made a strategic play decades in the making. And that strategy required NASA to give us a spot. So what is Canada's game plan in the space? And why does this space mission around the moon matters this much? The whole story starts with a fuel-loading robot. In 1969, NASA was building the Space Shuttle program and wanted international partners. They invited Canada. But nobody quite knew what Canada's role would be at the time. Shortly after, NASA engineers discovered something. A Canadian company had built a sophisticated robot to load fuel into CANDU nuclear reactors. It was precise and reliable, built to operate in environments where human error was not an option. That kind of tech was exactly what NASA needed for its mission. By 1975, Canada and NASA had signed an agreement. 6 years later, the Canadarm launched on the second Space Shuttle mission. It would go on to fly on 90 shuttle missions, deploying satellites, repairing the Hubble Space Telescope, and doing things in orbit that no human hand could replicate. Canada may not have built big expensive rockets, but what we did choose to focus on is building the thing that these rockets wouldn't function without. That distinction matters a lot because it sets the template for what happens next in this story. When NASA started designing the International Space Station in the 1980s, Canada came back with the same offer. We'll build you a better arm, and you'll take our astronauts to the ISS in exchange. That became the Canadarm2, built in Brampton, Ontario, by a company called McDonald.
Maybe, depending on the traffic, it can be a 40-minute to an hour drive from here. And it's also sometimes now known as Bangladesh because of the number of Hindus, Pakistanis, and people moved in there. My ex-girlfriend when she was still talking to me, she didn't recognize the place anymore.
Detwiller and Associates. This company is now known as MDA. It launched in 2001, and in the 25 years since, Canadarm has assembled the majority of the ISS components, moved tons of equipment, and supported nearly 100 of spacewalks. It has never come home. It's still up there right now doing its job, powered by Canadian engineering. The MDA story in itself is remarkable. The company was founded in 1969 in a basement in Vancouver. Then it solved a robotics problem that American scientists said was physically impossible, building an arm with 6 degrees of freedom on a moving platform in orbit. That breakthrough was cornerstone to Canada's space program. MDA today employs over 3,000 space engineers across Canada, UK, and the US. It's publicly listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and it's one of the stocks that we're closely watching. And now, decades later, Canada is using the same exact playbook again, just at a much bigger scale. So when the Artemis program came together and NASA needed partners to build the Gateway, which is a space station that will orbit the moon and serve as the staging point for human missions to the lunar surface, MDA was one of the only companies on Earth with the lineage and the technical depth to build what NASA needed next. In February,
I've driven past that building on the NASA tour bus. It has its own atmosphere.
2019, before any European nation even dared to commit, Canada committed to the Gateway on one condition. We'll build Canadarm3, the most sophisticated autonomous robotic system ever conceived, and in exchange, you'll give us a seat on the first crewed lunar mission since 1972. About a year later, in 2020, Jeremy Hansen's spot on that rocket was confirmed. When you hear the Canada's massive space investment numbers, with the Canadarm3 being the largest single financial commitment in the Canadian space history, the natural next question we ask is, who sees that money, and what is it exactly that we get for it? Most of it flows directly into the Canadian industry. MDA alone received a $1 billion contract from the Canadian Space Agency in June 2024, just for the design and construction phases of the arm. That single contract runs through 2030 and pulls in over 200 Canadian companies across the supply chain. Now, what's impressive is that the return of—
My guess is we do not have a tariff on all that stuff. I very much doubt NASA is paying the tariff for any of this stuff. This is probably wavered.
that investment is something that the Canadian Space Agency has actually tracked. Their own 2024 State of the Space Sector report found that for every dollar invested in CSA space development programs, $3.6 comes back in follow-on revenues after 5 years. That money doesn't even go into the government pockets. It flows directly into the Canadian companies. These are aerospace firms, engineering and tech companies that use those contracts to win global business, create high-paying jobs, and export Canadian innovation around the world. Now, when it comes to the lunar mission, one might say that none of that really buys the seat to the moon. It's actually earned through making yourself irreplaceable. Canada's Artemis 2 seat exists because no one else could build what we built. And that brings us to the Canada's space game plan. And that space plan begins, yet again, with the MDA. The Canadarm3 is going beyond the upcoming space mission to the moon. The technology inside Canadarm, the AI-driven semi-autonomous technology designed to repair and maintain a space station with minimal human input from 400,000 kilometers away, this technology is now being repackaged and sold to commercial space station operators, satellite servicing companies, and in-orbit assembly ventures. MDA calls it Skymaker. The logic is that if you can build a robot arm that works reliably in the harshest environments in the universe, then every lower stakes application becomes achievable. MDA has already signed deals with Axiom Space to build robotic interfaces for the first commercial module attaching to the ISS. They've delivered surgical robotics tools like NeuroArm and KidsArm for neurological and pediatric procedures, technology that's spun directly out of the Canadarm precision engineering. This company is now building the infrastructure for the next era of human activity in space. And it's winning commercial contracts globally off the back of a government investment that started with the nuclear reactor robot in 1960s. Now, Canadarm and MDA are not really a silver bullet for everything. And it's not enough to assert Canada's role in space. What else do we need to function in space? Let me know your guesses in the comments below. Now, for Canadarm3 to actually do its job from 400,000 kilometers away, something else has to work flawlessly first. The signal has to get there and back. Deep space communication is tricky. The further a spacecraft gets from Earth, the weaker the signal, the higher the latency, and the more powerful the ground equipment needs to be. NASA's Deep Space Network, the global system of giant antennas that track missions beyond Earth orbit, is the backbone of that communication chain. And for Artemis 2, part of that chain runs through a company in Kirkland, Quebec. Advantech Wireless Technologies built the amplifiers that maintain communication with the Orion spacecraft as it travels up to 2 million kilometers away from Earth. It's powerful enough to hold a clear signal with a spacecraft moving at 40,000 kilometers per hour around the moon. And it's NASA certified. It's flying the most high-profile human spaceflight mission in half a century. That proof of performance on an actual crewed lunar mission is a commercial credential that no amount of marketing spend can replicate. Every future deep space program that needs ground communications equipment will have Advantech's Artemis 2 record in front of them when evaluating suppliers. So, are you noticing the pattern that Canada has in the space theme? What they essentially do is they embed the Canadian technology so deeply into the mission that it becomes a reference point for every other mission that follows. And that strategy compounds over time. According to RBC's 2025 Space Strategy Report, Canada has a legitimate path to grow its space economy to over $20 billion by 2035. This is a fourfold increase in global space market that's headed towards $2 trillion. Now, all of that.
And what do we talk about here on this? Great power competition in the out there. Yeah, so this is definitely what we need to be doing more of, is just like we're burrowing our way in with our technology and the fact that we can do these things that no one else can. So there you go. Congratulations.
That is great, but how does the state of the current US-Canada relations hurt or help Canada's ambition? Space right now is not just a scientific frontier, it is a geopolitical competition. The United States and China are running parallel lunar programs that are explicitly designed to operate independently from each other. And both of them are racing to establish the who gets to set the rules for what happens on the moon and beyond. The Artemis Accords is the framework that Canada signed as a founding member in 2020, alongside the US, UK, Japan, and Australia. This is the Washington's attempt to build a coalition of like-minded nations around a shared set of principles for space, transparency, peaceful use, and resource extraction rights. Russia obviously criticized them, and China just didn't sign it, for the obvious reason, because they're building the coalition of their own. This is the Cold War, but up there in space. The prize for this goes beyond the naive ideologies. It's actually something much more fundamental to human survival. At the lunar South Pole, there are confirmed deposits of water ice. Water ice can be split.
Those who remember and watched the video from yesterday, you would have seen I had covered some of this stuff on NASA's stuff on the on all the drones they're building to support this operation.
Into hydrogen and oxygen, the very components that power rocket fuel. Whoever establishes a sustained presence near those deposits first has a significant logistical advantage for every future mission going deeper into the solar system. The moon is not the destination, it's just a starting point because it can be used as a refueling station. So the country that builds the infrastructure, that's the country that will shape the terms of access for everyone who comes after it.
And you can also drop ice asteroids on the moon to continue to replenish. So if you're thinking that this stuff is going to run out anytime soon, you won't.
Now, add that to the current Canada-US trade environment. While tariffs did strain nearly every other dimension of the bilateral relationship, Canada's role in the Artemis program sits in a different category entirely. Go Geomatics, analyzing the tariff situation last year, made a curious point. If trade tensions disrupted US-Canada space contracts, NASA would lose access to Canadian robotics expertise, potentially delaying Artemis operations even further and driving up costs. Canada's space contribution is, in a very concrete sense, leverage that tariffs cannot easily touch. You can't threaten to replace Canadarm3 with an American version because it simply doesn't exist. At a moment when Canada is actively looking to diversify its economic partnerships and reduces dependence on the US goodwill, having a non-negotiable seat at the table of the America's most strategically important space program is not a small thing. It's exactly the kind of asymmetric leverage that a mid-sized country like Canada needs in the world where great powers are playing hardball. Before the launch, the Canadian Space Agency was allowed to include about 150 grams of mementos aboard Orion. Mementos are these small symbolic items that the astronauts carry on board to represent their people, stories, and moments back on Earth. Canada chose this carefully. They picked a Canadian flag, the CSA logo, and Jeremy Hansen's personal mission patch. This patch was designed by Anishinaabe artist Henry Guimont from Saking First Nations in Manitoba. And he did that specifically to recognize the Indigenous peoples as Canada's original explorers, and he wanted to bring that identity into the deep space along with the mission. That detail lands in a very special way when you understand the full picture of what the world is going through right now. This goes beyond just being a symbolic filler. We're a country with 40 million people, a country that didn't build its own rockets. We don't have our launch site yet, which we will soon. We can talk about this a little bit more later, so let me know in the comments below if you want us to talk about it. And on top of all of that, our space budget is also a fraction of what NASA spends in a month. Nevertheless, we get to plant our actual identity at the edge of the solar system because we made the right bet at the right time and built the one thing that the mission could not function without. The pride in that moment is real for all Canadians, and it's earned through hard work and intention. The moon is not the finish line, it's just the beginning, and the Canada's name is on the R that's powering all of it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to share it with a friend and hit the like button below. This really helps our channel grow.
Yep. So that was that. I'm continuing to do the space content for anyone out there who's going to watch this. My hair's a bit of a mess today. That's Tukes for you. Anyways, yeah. So if you like this stuff and you want to see more, be sure to like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends about me and let me help grow. I like to see more people in the chat and interactions, but I appreciate everyone who did stop by and who will stop by in the future. And I really do need to update that locals page. Maybe I gotta get this puzzle done. You can barely see it behind me, but yeah, so that's kind of where we're going. So that's it.